2022. What a year it's been. We emerged from the shadow of the pandemic. Though reluctantly, offices made the move to call employees back to office. It marked the end of remote work, the end of attending Zoom calls in athleisure, the end of working endless office hours and a return to the office. But little did employers know a changed workforce was resuming work. Their priorities had changed. Yes, change was in the air. I'm Hem Kaur Saroya and this is Office 2.0, your workplace trends report of 2022. Why does your workplace matter to you? What makes your office a sacred space? Why do we do what we do? It's a question we all must ask ourselves. Our jobs have come to define who we are, how much money we make, our personal ambition, our lifestyle, which is why it's high time we start caring. Fact, the average person will spend 90,000 hours at work over a lifetime. 90,000. It's fair to say your workplace will impact your quality of life. The year 2022 marked a return to office spaces for a global workforce after 2 years of being locked down and working from home, and big changes followed. A bulk of offices said you have to return to the concrete jungle. We had US President Joe Biden urging Americans in March 2022 to return to in-person work. Big tech giants tweaked their own policies and played with hybrid work models. Many wondered, are remote jobs really disappearing? Yes and no. We saw a dip in remote working. One analysis found that just 1 out of 7 job postings on LinkedIn in the United States offered remote work as an option in October 2022. But a changed workforce demanded something else. After 2 years of being locked down, managing a grueling job with personal chores, workers knew that going back was not an option. They realized that the office was not the only space which mattered. Work from home meant that the home also took center stage. We reconnected with our loved ones, rejigged our priorities and demanded that our managers understand the same. So began the great return to office debate. Take a look at this survey. It's from December 2022. 41 biggest ideas that will change our world in 2023. It clearly says that the future is a balance between hybrid and remote work. A LinkedIn survey predicts that hybrid work is here to stay. Even if bosses wanted to run a tight ship, employees were in no rush to return to their desks. Flexibility became the name of the game. Women in particular drove the flexibility at work wave. Remember, during lockdowns, they had to carry the burden of juggling family with work, screaming kids, ailing elders, household demands. Women had to handle them all while attending Zoom calls. And so they are demanding flexible work options. In some cases, they won the battle. But unfortunately, headlines like these made the rounds more often than not. Do you work in HR? I bet most of us know what I'm talking about. With all this talk of flexibility, HR managers had to upskill. They had to learn on the job. Many firms were forced to pivot to hybrid or remote work in an ad hoc way. A nightmare for HR, and so we heard of a new job opening, the Chief Remote Officer or CRO. He or she had the rather difficult task of managing all expectations of bosses and workers, to manage smooth functioning in remote setups, to weave policies around work from anywhere, to ensure employees were meeting their KRAs while working an unconventional shift. Keeping the bosses happy, essentially, the CRO was the new bad cop in town. Bosses and managers were forced to change in 2022. With the demand for remote work, a new breed of managers emerged. Helicopter bosses. You know, the ones who micromanage your day from a distance. Newsflash, no one likes such bosses. They drove down productivity and created a toxic working environment. Surveys show that this constant needling led to walkouts at the workplace. And who can forget? Tech and artificial intelligence are coming for our jobs. It's a fear which has been dominating organizations for quite some time now. It's now a reality. Here are some stats. The World Economic Forum predicts that AI and automation will lead to the creation of 97 million jobs by 2025. While that spells good news, it may be time for you to upskill. Soon, your role could change or be made redundant. This is a trend which will be the norm in the new year. Repetitive roles may become automated. Lawyers could use tech to cut down on the time spent reviewing case histories to find precedents. Doctors could use tech to analyze scans for diagnosis. In retail and engineering too, job roles could evolve. So make sure you upskill. Now you would think with all this talk of flexibility, employees would be prioritizing work-life balance. Think again. There are bosses who are making headlines yet again for promoting working long hours, sleeping in the office, romanticizing the idea of slogging it out to mint money. This is exactly what hustle culture is all about, and Elon Musk seems to be bringing it back. There's no denying it, it's toxic. Recently, the founder-CEO of Bombay Shaving Company was also criticized for peddling a success mantra, which required working 18-hour workdays for 4 to 5 years. Well, Gen Z called out his bluff. Yes, Gen Z, the youngest generational cohort. This generation was perhaps the biggest influencer of office trends in 2022, and I mean both good and bad. They focused on diversity and inclusivity, but also walked out of jobs on a whim. They are the driving forces of change and also some questionable trends. Yes, we are talking about quiet quitting. If there's one trend that dominated headlines this year, it's quiet quitting, a movement led once again by millennials and Gen Z. Millennials set boundaries at work. They started speaking out about hustle culture. And when their bosses didn't listen, they simply stopped caring about their jobs. And naturally, businesses suffered. Here's a quick recap of quiet quitting.
Here's a scenario. You're burnt out at work. Your boss is breathing down your neck to meet deadlines. You've just emerged from a crippling pandemic lockdown. You're juggling multiple priorities. What do? Do you fall in line? Do you walk out of the job in anger? Do you revolt? Younger generations have found a new way to tackle the situation. Why quit your job when you can do the bare minimum at work? Limit your tasks to what is essential. Avoid working longer hours and set clear boundaries for a work-life balance. This is quiet quitting. Let's dive into some statistics now. Remember the great resignation wave of 2021 when scores walked out of dream jobs? According to a Pew Research Center survey, lack of advancement opportunities, low pay, feeling disrespected at work were the top reasons Americans quit their jobs in 2021. Data shows that nearly 71.6 million people left their jobs between April 2021 and 22. And in June this year, the number of people quitting reached 4.2 million. Employers are worried. According to a survey, 51% of HR professionals are concerned about quiet quitting. Many admit it's happening within their own organization. Quiet quitting is reducing employee morale in the workplace. Productivity has taken a hit. Millennials are leading the trend. Here are some signs of quiet quitting. A quiet quitter may stop attending meetings, start arriving late and leaving early, contribute less to team projects, and lack passion or enthusiasm for work. Why is this happening? You see, the youngest members of the workforce are seeing changes they never have. The pandemic delayed important milestones, isolated them. Many of them were just entering the workforce. They lost jobs. They're now battling inflation, trying to save to meet their needs. According to LinkedIn's Global Talent Trends 2022 report, people are questioning their careers and seeking more work-life balance. So, what can employers do? As we head into 2023, start engaging with your employees more, make them feel appreciated, recognize their hard work, help them manage stress, have empathy for their personal struggles. As for all you quiet quitters, don't think you're getting your way by doing the bare minimum. If you're quietly quitting, your manager could be quietly firing you. He or she could be making your job miserable, treating you poorly, ignoring you in meetings, dismissing your opinion at work, forcing you to quit. Recession fears are looming large into the next year. Organizations are indulging in cost-cutting. So, if you're planning to quit quietly, beware. You may be quietly fired.
When we look at how to reinvent workspaces, we aren't just talking aesthetics or employee performance reviews and the various work trends that have emerged over the past year. We're also looking at how those in managerial positions can create a better work culture. This includes the CEOs, the managers, the directors. Perhaps it's time for a performance review of the big boss. Leadership skills? Check. Dedication and diligence? Check. Years and experience on the resume? Check. Analytical skills? Check. Sounds like the recipe for the perfect boss, right? But what about the emotional quotient? What about soft skills like compassion, being a good listener? As per a LinkedIn survey of nearly 23,000 employees, it was found that workers now are actively seeking bosses who are empathetic, bosses who are compassionate. We've all heard stories of difficult bosses, but millennials and Gen Z are just not having it. Another survey found that more than 71% millennials wished for their colleagues to be like second family. Trend report, austerity and tough love are passé. The pandemic has altered our perception of work. Work and personal life are closely entwined, and the resulting stress, economic anxiety, uncertainty means that people require more flexibility and empathy now more than ever. As per research, experts say the employees are looking for human leadership, a phrase used to describe an empathetic boss who can adapt to the needs of their employees, enable effective communication, and create a safe and happy workspace. Research shows that workplaces with effective human leadership witness great employee engagement, better overall well-being. Employees are also more likely to stick around. According to a 2020 study, disengaged workers had 37% higher absenteeism. They were also found to be 60% more likely to make errors. Unfortunately, though, as per a 2022 survey, just about 1 in 4 people have a boss that aced human leadership. Another study suggests that almost 1 in 5 people have experienced harassment or psychological abuse. That's 583 million people across the globe that have been subjected to snide remarks, taunts, bullying, intimidation. So whether it's the baggage of the pandemic or a new Gen Z-driven wave, workplaces are in for a major overhaul, and we are here for it. As the workforce expands, the expectations have changed, and employee mental health is important, not just on an individual level, but it also directly impacts business. We spend so much time on creative and crisp CVs. We essay our hobbies and interests and talk at length about employee work ethic. Perhaps it's also time for an employer report card. So next time a colleague comes and asks for help, do not just throw them in the deep end. Maybe consider walking them through the problem. Kindness and empathy are in, and needless bravado is just toxic. They say there is great power in numbers, so it's perhaps time to look at how to build meaningful relationships at work. In 2023, employees wish to say goodbye to toxic hustle culture, do-or-die mentality, and most importantly, detached bosses. So if you're a boss watching me right now, wake up and smell the coffee, else you'll be staring at empty desks soon. So if you don't want to be quietly fired, it's high time you become more vocal about what you need. Bosses also need to pay close attention to the changing needs of their employees. In our next story, we tell you what employees want and what managers can do to retain them.
As we head into 2023, we need to account for a changing workplace, our own evolving priorities, and of course, the daunting aspect of a recession. Layoffs are making headlines every day as companies cut corners. But there's also a struggle to retain talent as people look for secondary sources of income. You know about moonlighting, right? Companies are trying to create policies to keep employees happy, let them explore their hobbies through a second job, but ensuring there's no conflict of interest. In 2023, managers should invest more in training and upskilling. It's a good idea to focus on the talent within than hiring from outside. This not only helps the employee perform better and do good work for the organization, it also acts as a trust-building exercise between the manager and team members. According to the recent survey of US workers, 83% of workers want to improve their skills. This is a priority for them as they head into the new year. Most experts predict that 2023 will be the year where people strive to achieve work-life balance. While this year we saw companies playing a tug-of-war with employees over return-to-office policies, next year, flexibility at work will be in demand, and companies which don't have flexible work schedules risk losing out on top talent. They say employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. So if you're a good manager, you'll see plenty of boomerang employees in 2023. You know, the ones who leave and then return. You know how we blame HR for everything? Well, in 2023, HR will have to introduce better policies. Giving importance to an employee's mental health, corporate wellness programs cannot be for lip service alone. They must factor in employee behavior, health concerns, personal struggles, and have more empathy for work schedules. Experts say the 3 R's of 2023 could be a return to office, recession, and readjustment. A part of this adjustment could be in the number of working days. Yes, we're talking about 4-day work weeks. Many are calling it the secret to the perfect work-life balance. Will this happen? We'll discuss.
With all this talk about flexibility, we can't forget about the 4-day week. It's not a new concept. This past year saw many companies putting this employment schedule to the test. It's an employment model in which full-time employees can work 4 days a week as opposed to the traditional 5 days. That means a 3-day weekend. It would seem like the dream scenario, right? But can a 4-day work week ensure better output and productivity? Let's find out. With millennials and Gen Z actively ditching the hustle culture, quality of life has taken center stage and how we work may never be the same again. And the pilot program for a 4-day week in the UK is a sign of the times. 100 companies, that's about 2,600 employees, have signed up for this 4-day schedule, and here's the best part: reduced working hours with no pay cut. Trials, especially in the UK, have been based on the 100-80-100 model. Basically, what this means is 100% of the pay for 80% of the time. In turn, employees are expected to be 100% committed to maintaining productivity. That's non-negotiable. That being said, this isn't a blanket policy, and different countries tried various permutations and combinations. While some have shorter weeks, others have adopted a compressed week with a slight reduction in hours. Many have agreed to a 4-day week, given that employees put in more hours on the days that they do come into work. Though it isn't the norm yet, it is being hailed as a transformative policy. Advocates of the 4-day work week say it can boost productivity for many companies. This has proven to be a useful tool for retaining employees. And if we have learned anything so far, 2022 has been all about adopting flexibility at work, and this work model happens to offer a great deal of that. From the atom bank to marketing giants, companies are realizing that the traditional 5-day work week isn't aligned with the goals and desires of the new and evolving workforce anymore. According to surveys of the pilot scheme in UK, about 95% of the companies surveyed said that productivity had either stayed the same or improved since introducing 4-day weeks. But that's not the complete picture, and there are still some teething issues that need to be addressed. For those whose work involves direct engagement with consumers, customers may feel that a business isn't as accessible as employees are only working 4 days in a week. This disconnect may prove to be a huge loss for businesses. As we mentioned earlier, if not implemented well, a 4-day work week may just become a compressed week, and that completely defeats the purpose. But if you compare, the pros outweigh the cons. There are some kinks that need to be ironed out. But as more and more companies launch their own pilot programs, a 4-day work week is all set to become a reality for many. We've told you about quiet quitting, but there's another trend that caught our attention this year. The world economy is battling a slew of crises. The cost of living squeeze and energy crunch, record high inflation. Amidst this, a new trend emerged: the great unretirement. It's where retired personnel and pensioners were forced to rejoin the workforce. What is the great unretirement? We'll explain.
Here's a list of the trends we have seen so far. The Great Resignation, scores of people quitting their jobs. The Great Retirement, higher number of older people quitting the workforce. Quiet quitting, we don't need to tell you about that now. Add another one to the list, the Great Unretirement. A trend witnessed mainly in the UK, all thanks to the cost of living crisis. Usually, retirement plans look something like this: picking up a new hobby, going back to ones that were put on the back burner years ago. quality time with family, backpacking around the world, a spiritual retreat. The list may vary depending on your interests and desires, but rarely does getting back to a 9-to-5 feature on these bucket lists. A growing number of people in their 50s and older who are looking for a job, they now want a job which can help them live comfortably in their 60s. Their monthly pension is just not cutting it. Turns out it is not nearly enough to cover even essential costs. The pandemic saw a plunge in the number of people working in their 50s and 60s. And just as the world was getting accustomed to the new normal, turns out pensions and retirement funds are no longer sufficient. How does one calculate how much we need to retire? There's one simple formula for it. It's dependent on various factors like your lifestyle, the country you live in, the amount you put towards your pension, and we can't forget about inflation. According to some estimates in the UK, it is said that on average an individual would need about £13,000 a year. Let's say you figure out a formula that works for you. You stick to your budget, you spend your life saving up, you invest, open a high-yield savings account, make sizable contributions to your pension funds, only to find out that it isn't enough. That's precisely what the over 65s had to go through. Disillusioned, retired workers. They are now back on the job market. A quarter of the retirees are considering picking up a job. According to data from the Office for National Statistics, there has been an uptick in economic activity between August and October alone. The number of people aged between 50 and 64 who considered themselves retired dropped by 84,000. Consumer confidence is on a downward spiral. Spending power is low, and the aging population in the UK is struggling to make ends meet. They have been left financially insecure and vulnerable. The pandemic has changed the way we work. There is renewed focus on work-life balance, a shift from hustle culture, and more emphasis on setting boundaries and taking necessary time off. But for some time, especially the over 65s in the UK, it's a luxury they can no longer afford.
And as we look to reshape and reorganize traditional work models, we asked you, how do you want your office to look in 2023? Is it empathetic bosses, hybrid work, the option to work from anywhere in the world? Do you want to be able to set your own goals and work at your own pace? The verdict is in. And with that, we wrap up this trend report. 2022 was the year of introducing new policy shifts and setting in motion the era of work-life balance and bidding goodbye to toxic hustle culture. We hope 2023 is the year when we truly adopt and promote a healthier work culture, one that is better aligned with our goals and needs. We wish you all a splendid 2023 with better opportunities and an evolved workplace. Thank you for watching.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.